It's a tale from the Twilight Zone. It's called The Face of Death. Chicago, early 1930s. Luigi Macaroni is the boss of the East Side Mafia, a 35-year-old gangster who has made his fortune building an enormous business empire funded by blackmail, theft, extortion and protection rackets. He is a tubby man wearing a black and white pinstriped wide-collared business suit, a trilby hat and a purple satin hanky in his left breast pocket. He reaches inside his suit and takes out a golden cigar case. He lights a large, thick Havana cigar with a diamond encrusted with the initials LM, Zippo lighter. "Who is on the list tonight, boss?" asks Mickey Spaghetti, one of the mafia leader's henchmen. He too is wearing a suit, pinstripe grey, and carrying a violin case. Muggsy Bolognese, he is 70 years old and the boss of the West Side Mafia. He is an old wrinkle-faced, bald-headed man and is wearing a plain white silk suit, black shirt and purple velvet tie. He opens a bottle of expensive Napoleon brandy and pours another glass. He made his fortune during the Prohibition of the 1920s, brewing and selling moonshine and whiskey, which he sold on the black market to the local community. "Are you ready, sir?" asks Franklin, the old man's butler. Muggsy nodded. It is 12 o'clock midnight in a dark and gloomy alley in the city of Chicago. The raindrops splash in puddles as the two mafia leaders stare into each other's eyes, their faces illuminated by a single fizzing street lamp. "So, this is finally it?" asks Luigi Macaroni, staring into his rival's eyes. Both of the boss's gangs are standing behind them. "Fair fight?" asks Muggsy Bolognese. "Me against you. Man on man," he laughs. "I am 70 years old, you idiot." "Well, what do you suggest we do?" laughs Luigi. "Roll the dice?" Muggsy grinned. "How about me and my boys against you and your—" He gazed towards the young men standing behind his enemy. "Against your cannon fodder," he laughed. Both of the bosses took a few steps backwards, away from one another. "Winner takes all," suggested Luigi. There was a lot of clicking sounds as the young gang members opened their violin cases. After half an hour of Beethoven, the young men threw away the violins and picked up their submachine guns from the pavement. Rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat went the machine guns. After 2 minutes of rapid fire, all the gang members were dead, except for Muggsy Bolognese and Luigi Macaroni. Luigi put a pistol to the old man's head and pulled the trigger. He burst out laughing and slowly walked back down the alley, over his enemies' bodies and into the night. The scene: an emergency hospital ward somewhere in Chicago. 4 green uniformed porters lift a patient on a trolley from the ambulance, its red and blue lights flashing in the dark, moonless sky. The victim's face is covered in blood-red stained bandages. One of the porters is carrying a bag of blood, and another is holding an oxygen mask to the old man's face. A young man in a white lab coat runs up to the patient lying on the trolley. "What happened?" asked Dr. Peterson. "He was shot in the face," explains Keith, one of the porters. "It is a miracle that he survived at all. It turns out that he has a metal plate in his skull. which shielded his brain from the bullet. Talk about luck, laughed the young doctor. One day later, the body of Luigi Macaroni was dredged from a river. He had been celebrating his victory against the West Side Mafia by drinking Muggsy Bolognese's cellar of rare and exotic wine. Well, several bottles anyway. He had fallen into the river on his way home and drowned. One of the policemen standing over the dead fat man's body knelt down on one leg and searched the pockets of the soaking wet black and white suit. He opened Luigi's wallet and took out several $100 bills and put them into his jacket pocket. Deputy Riggs scratched his head. "Are you going to use the money as evidence?" he asked. Sheriff Knox smiled at the young man. "What money?" he asked. The deputy frowned. The policeman continued searching the fat man's wallet. He handed an organ donor card to his young colleague. "You'd better give this to one of the nurses at the hospital," he suggested. "It'll probably be useless, though." Sheriff Knox scratched his head. "What use is a liver full of alcohol?" He sniffed the old man's corpse. "Lungs full of tobacco smoke and a heart full of water," he sighed. It was 2 days later when Muggsy Bolognese finally regained consciousness. His face was covered in beige bandages. "I'm afraid that there wasn't really much of a face to salvage," explained Dr. Peterson. "The bullet blew off your nose, smashing the bone to smithereens." He paused. "And your face was so burn-scarred with shrapnel," and he vomited into a bucket held in his left hand. What about plastic surgery?" asked the muffled voice of Muggsy Bolognese. "Already done," smiled the young doctor, straightening his tie. "Luckily, we found a face donor in the nick of time." "What do you mean?" asks the old man. "We have grafted the face of a dead man onto you," he chuckled. "I guarantee you, Mr. Bolognese, when the bandages come off next week, you will look like a new man, half your age." 1 week later, Dr. Peterson unwinds the bandages around the old man's head. Muggsy Bolognese stares at his reflection, and the face of Luigi Macaroni stares back at him. "That's the bastard who shot me!" cries Muggsy. His reflection laughs. "Tough luck, old man. I guess that you will be staring into the face of death for the rest of your life." The end.